Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Weddle, and I'm very pleased. We're getting an echo here.
Your audio seems fine here.
We did not get the audio in the intro.
Your audio seems fine now.
Okay, I'll keep going with the echo. Again, welcome to RecAd Savvy, the webcast about all things recruitment advertising and recruitment marketing. And today we're going to cover the topic, how recruiters can get a better response from their job ads in a tight labor market.
Okay.
And
Peter, can I just pause you there, Peter, just to double check if there are any duplicate tabs open either for yourself or Rob, because I know how distracting it can be.
Yeah, I only have one tab on.
Okay.
But I do get the echo.
Okay. Let's bring Rob on, and we can check if there's any echo with Rob. Will I bring Rob on screen?
Well, let me introduce our guest, Rob Boersma, who is the sales operations leader at Talent.com.
Hi, Peter. I hope your echo gets fixed. I hate that. I've got that before on a number of calls, and I can tell you it's distracting. But I'm super happy to be here, and excited to get our session going. So thanks for having me.
So let's take a moment and have you introduce yourself and Talent.com to our audience.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Rob Boersma. I work in sales strategy at Talent.com. I've had a number of jobs here at Talent, most recently the VP of Operations as well. Before that, I worked out west in Canada. So I'm from Calgary originally. So I'm a big hockey fan, big mountains fan, anything to do with the outdoors, hiking, biking, skiing, all up my alley. Before I worked at Talent, which has been quite a number of years now, I worked in talent attraction at a Fortune 500 oil and gas company. So I've been on both sides of the pond, seen it both from somebody who's trying to recruit and now from an industry standpoint, trying to be the connector of candidates and employers. So that's a little bit about me. Talent.com is a global job search website. We're based in Montreal, Canada, but have offices all over the world. Europe, we have hubs in Lausanne, London, Barcelona, South America, and Colombia. Big presence in the US as well. Our job is basically to connect candidates with employers. And so, we're an aggregator. We collect job postings in an automated way and then use advanced matching to connect job seeker intent, so searches with employers' postings to be able to generate hires for those employers.
Great. Well, it's really terrific having you here today. And as I mentioned in my stuttering start, the topic that we're going to talk about today is how recruiters can get a better response from their job ads in a tight labor market. So let's talk first about that labor market. I've described it as a zero-sum talent market, which is maybe an exaggeration because there are obviously certain aspects of the marketplace where there are enough candidates to go around. But to me, this feels like the war for talent, which got started way back in the late 1990s, all over again. Well, what's your take on the labor market?
Yeah, I think tight is still the way to describe that. I know there's been lots of great content out there, talking about just how unique this current labor market is, especially given the economic conditions. I mean, we're really in a unique period in time in terms of recruiting and how tight it is for recruiters in terms of getting people into their jobs. A small personal anecdote to kind of talk a little bit about the tightness of this labor market. When I was working in the oil and gas industry in the west of Canada, in the talent attraction department, my boss at the time said, well, it's ironic that we're called talent attraction because we're actually in the business of rejection. We're in the business of filtering. And so, that was her mandate at the time. And that was largely true. Is there would often be hundreds or more of applications for these well-paying trades, oil and gas kind of jobs. And same with the white collar positions that we were hiring for. There was lots and lots of supply, of job seeker supply. And so when you look during that time frame and kind of compare that to today's market, a lot of that was, close to after the 2008 financial crash. And so the job market was a lot different then. There was at times in the US, 5 to 6 unemployed people for every single job opening. And so you can imagine what that's like as a job seeker when there's so much competition. And you can imagine what that's like as a recruiter and why you might be in the business of rejection and filtering more than attraction. Now, it doesn't mean there's not hard to fill positions. It doesn't mean there's not churn, that you still need to ensure that there's bums and seats in your company. But at the same time, the dynamic is much different. So that was, we had said about 5 to 6 unemployed people per opening. Today, we're looking at an inverse situation where there's almost 2, so about 1.67 open jobs for every single unemployed person who's looking for work right now in the US. And so that's a stark contrast. If you think about that in the context that, hey, if every single person that was looking for work right now found a job in the US, there would still be close to 4 million job openings. And that's a crazy dynamic, and that's really changed what companies need to deal with. Now, I think the question is that changing right now? Have the bumps in interest rate really impacted that? And we see inflation starting to come down, and we can talk about the cursed word of a soft landing if you'd like in a bit here. But the reality is that this is probably the new normal. Is the labor force is not going to continue to grow dramatically, but the demand is quite high. And so that dynamic means that some companies will lose. They will not fill the jobs that they need to fill. When you think about, well, why do companies need to fill jobs? They need to fill the jobs to grow a lot of the time. They need to fill jobs to maintain their business and to continue operating. And that's a stark comparison when you say, well, that was, much, much easier even 5 years ago than it is today, right now. And so certainly it's a war on talent. The economic changes don't seem to have had a really robust impact on the labor market itself, and that's likely to be sustained. And kind of the last point I have on that, Deloitte puts out their 2023 economic forecast every year, and they have a labor market section in which they've said this is the new normal in terms of tightness for the labor market. So even if the demand cools off on employment, the labor force is unlikely to continue to grow at the rate that's required to really have a massive loosening effect. And so recruiters should know that and kind of understand that and have those conversations with their leaders as they go into things like budgeting.
Yeah, I think there are 2 other dynamics that we need to acknowledge. One is that the huge wave of, at least in the States, the baby boomer population are moving off into retirement. And those numbers are hard to account for in terms of replacement. And secondly, the labor force participation rate is at historic lows, particularly among men. So we're seeing, just a huge tidal wave of people exiting the workplace, and we're seeing the participation rate of those who might potentially be coming into the workforce lower than it's been historically. So those 2 dynamics are in part why I described it as a zero-sum talent market. And that basically means, as you were saying, in this kind of job market, there are only 2 kinds of employers, winners and losers. Either you are able to acquire the talent your company needs to succeed, or you're not, because this isn't like the good old days when there was a win-win talent market and everybody could find the talent that they want. So with that as background, what do you think? Should employers be doing something different? Should they be changing their go-to-market strategy? Should they, obviously, you and I believe in the importance of recruitment advertising. Should they be investing more in recruitment advertising? Should they be acquiring new talent technology? Should they be turning the whole thing over to AI? What should be an appropriate response to this new kind of talent market?
It's a good question. I'll break it into the 3 pieces. So should they turn the whole thing over to AI? We can talk about AI specifically later. Today, right now, there's not a solution that's going to allow a recruiter to turn over their entire process to that. Now, that might change in the future. but recruiters need to fill jobs for the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 2 years. A lot of that technology is being developed. So let's talk about the other two recommendations that you had. What about recruitment costs and what about technology? We kind of left off the last point saying that, hey, look, this is probably going to be sustained tightness in the labor market. There's people who are a lot smarter than me who continue to say that on news outlets. And, we see economists reporting on that. And we say, okay, so what do we do with that as somebody who works in recruitment marketing? From a cost perspective, recruitment marketers need to understand that in their budget, short term, when there's more competition, when there's more advertisers in the pool, competition increases. And largely the way that job ads are bought and sold right now is through pay-per-click advertising, which is an auction system. And so when there's more demand in an auction system, typically the prices are going to increase. It also means that job seekers can be pickier. Now, there's a whole nother side topic of the benefits that a tight labor market has for many different types of job seekers. Andrew Flowers has said a number of times that a rising tide floats all boats, which seems to be true when there is tightness in the labor market, because it gives workers options to be able to move positions more easily and seek better wages and that sort of thing. But the reality is, what it means as a recruiter is that job seekers are going to be more selective. And so you need to work harder and try a little bit harder to get in front of them. And so from a recruitment marketing cost perspective, I think it's fair to say that those costs will not decrease, not this year. Now, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to condense the hiring funnel over the long term, which is going to help both the candidate experience and the cost situation as more technology starts to come into play. But the reality is right now, at least in your next budgeting cycles, not only is it going to be more expensive to advertise, but you also have to consider all of the costs associated with hiring. So wages have increased pretty significantly, and you need to be competitive. So a lot of industries have seen close to 10% wage increase year over year, which is a massive increase in a lot of industries. And so you need to warm up your hiring managers and warm up the people with the purse strings to understand what they need to pay, what benefits they need to be offering, and also that your recruitment strategy has enough buffer in the budget to be able to be competitive. Because as we said, there could be a situation where you do not fill those jobs. So, prioritization is important. In terms of technology, it's a whole nother bucket. And like we said, I think the hiring funnel is going to start to shrink as more technologies come and basically try to get recruiters and job seekers closer and closer together. And that'll alleviate some of those cost pressures. The main technology still used right now in most recruiters' lives is an ATS, which I think is fair to say a lot of them are relatively archaic, although it's still the staple tool used by recruiters to filter and organize candidates. Now, remember the comment about we're in the business of rejection and filtering? A lot of ATSs are built for that purpose. They're built to manage, organize, reject, sort, and filter candidates, not necessarily as a marketing tool. And so, it's funny to me that cars can park themselves and Google knows your next move and Facebook knows what you're thinking at night. Yet recruiters can't tell if a candidate meets their minimum requirements without actually physically reading that resume. Things like that are going to change. So rather than adding technology just for the sake of technology, what I often advise people to do is try to tackle specific problems within their hiring funnel. So put on the hat of a job seeker, review your process, and try to make your hiring process more like a marketer. So what can you do in your tech stack to make sure that every candidate gets a reply within a day? To make sure that your apply path takes less than 2 minutes? To ensure that you follow up with or remarket to people who have done partial applications or abandoned applications? There's a lot of technology in our space that can address problems like that. And those are things that are going to make a meaningful impact on your ability to fill your jobs and have more candidates coming in at a lower cost, as if you kind of really put on that marketing hat. And, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But those would be kind of my technology recommendations: is look for specific problems, find software that kind of solves those, and then understand that costs could be increasing over the next couple of years here before true technology impacts our space.
Those are all great ideas. And I would only add that in addition to tracking down those who only did a partial application, and sad to say, that's a relatively large percentage of the people who express an interest in an opening. So we need to look at our application process, if you will. But it's also important to look at the silver medalists from prior job postings, all those resumes in your ATS that you were talking about, because a lot of those people were a silver medalist only by the slimmest of margins and may well be a very viable candidate for a new opening. So we need to look at them as well. And I'd also like to underscore the point you made about making sure that the chain of command, the C-suite in particular, understands that just because they've read about all these layoffs and just because the economy has slowed down doesn't mean that costs are necessarily going to go down. I mean, I've seen some data recently that showed that job postings are down 17% year over year from June, but in point of fact, they're up 27% pre-pandemic. So in point of fact, the competition is greater than it was before we went through the pandemic. And I think it's important to make that case up the chain of command so that recruitment advertising budgets are protected.
For sure, for sure. I mean, the workforce has grown by, there's 4.5 million more people employed today than there were the day before the pandemic. That's a huge growth in terms of the number of people who are occupying positions. And so clearly there's much more demand, even though proportionally we see some dips. You know, it's good to contextualize that. Well, what about 3 years ago? What about 5 years ago? If my goals haven't changed since then, let's be aware of that.
Okay, so if you hang out on social media these days, you're going to see no end of commentary about how to improve the job posting. That all of that commentary, it seems to me, implies that there's something wrong or something that's not working with the job posting. What's your take on that? Is the job posting still the best way to go to market in recruitment advertising?
Yeah, the job posting itself is a weird and wonderful thing. Wonderful might be a stretch of a word in a lot of cases. I would bring this conversation back to my previous point about how the dynamic of recruitment has changed, and recruiters need to become marketers. Again, it's not a game of filtering and of rejection anymore. It's truly a game of living up to the name of being talent attraction. You need to attract job seekers to your job postings. So yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment that there's a lot of room for improvement in this. And so when I say the dynamic has changed, and you have to think more like a marketer, you got to understand that a marketer is dealing with a group of people that there's lots of shoe choice and toaster choices and fridges you can buy and vacations you can take. And so there's a lot of stimulus for people who are interested in partaking in those purchases. Now that dynamic is becoming more and more similar. As we said, there's literally more job openings than there are unemployed people. There's lots of options for people in many different fields. And so what that means is you're now targeting a group of people that is being, for lack of better terms, sometimes inundated with opportunities. Now, that's not the case in all verticals and all jobs, of course. There's cardinality about location and seniority and these sorts of things. But that's the dynamic and the mentality that recruiters need to have. So when you're looking at your job posting, make it for the candidate. Don't make it for HR. A lot of ATS systems were built around compliance, and were built around ensuring that you're compliant with a lot of the regulations around hiring, which that's fine. There's a lot of legal regulations around selling and fine print that needs to happen. But a lot of times that's what's promoted in terms of job ads. And so tell people what they want. We did a study here at talent.com to understand, well, what do people look for and what do they prioritize? Salary, unsurprisingly, the number one, far and ahead. Don't hide it. There's lots of great research out there that pushes for salary transparency that helps to level the playing field between the gender pay gap between men and women. But besides that, it's also beneficial for recruiters. There's, Recruitonomics has done some awesome research showing that the application rate on jobs is significantly higher when it shows the salary. We see that as well. We see higher number of clicks and interests and conversions on jobs that show the salary because you're showing your cards in advance. you're having that conversation ahead of that. So salary, number one. Number two, people want to know about health insurance benefits. Obviously, that's country dependent. Different markets want different things, but especially in the US, that's number two, far and ahead. Show me what you have for insurance and health benefits. Flexible working hours is number three. That's a big pandemic change. People understand they want to make that change towards having more life balance. And then vacation days. Those are really things that matter to employees when they're looking for work. So why bury that at the bottom of your job? Make sure that those are visible. Think about the benefits, talk about your culture, and then talk about the requirements for that job. And then, you can get to the filtering aspect after that of, I would like you to have an undergraduate degree or a specific safety ticket or X number of years experience. But really put that good, juicy stuff in advance and really think like, how would a marketer build a conversion landing page? Imagine you're trying to sell shoes, except it's getting people to apply for this job. How do you get as many people as you can to do that are in the relevant target market for that role?
I used to be a partner in the Hay Group, and obviously we focused on compensation and benefits. And the way you get to compensation and benefits is that you do job analysis. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see in a job posting, to the point you made earlier, is that oftentimes the position description, which is a document used internally to measure one job against another for pay purposes, is used for the job posting. And I'm here to tell you that the words requirements and responsibilities are words only a lawyer could love. I mean, they are not marketing terms.
Yeah.
So I think you need to think about your vocabulary, one, since you're in the marketing business. And two, you need to think about format. Again, I look at a lot of job postings and they are laid out like a position description, whereas they need to be laid out as an electronic sales brochure. And if you look at most sales brochures, they lead with upfront the most persuasive elements of whatever it is that they're trying to sell. So I would say a great job posting ought to start with a summary that says, here's the pay, here's the healthcare insurance kind of things that we have, here's the career progression opportunity, which is always a big attraction, particularly for A-level players. And you really front load the job posting. And you do that, A, because it's a different kind of document, but B, because we've all learned that attention spans have shrunk. So you've got to really catch people in the first 10 or 15 minutes, hook them so that they'll stay and read the rest of the job posting, or they're going to go on and you will have lost that opportunity. So I couldn't agree more that the job posting is just fine. Thank you very much. But it, as with everything else, it needs to evolve. It needs to evolve to recognize how the job seeker is changing, their habits, their expectations, and it needs to evolve to recognize this change in the talent market, the tighter talent market that we've been talking about.
Yeah, really well said.
So did you have something more you want to say?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I'm just showing my complete agreement with what you're saying is, think like a marketer, take off the compliance hat.
Okay, so here's the rub. According to a recent survey by CompTIA, only 27% of the workforce, and that number really hasn't changed much over the decades. So something less than a third, let's say it that way, of the workforce is actively searching for a job at any point in time, which means that we have to find a way to connect with all those people who aren't actively looking for a job. Any thoughts on how best to do that in a tight labor market?
For sure. So, first of all, I think the idea of job seeking being binary, you're either passive or you're active, is over.
I agree.
Like many things, it's a spectrum. Because you're not either looking or not looking. People are kind of looking, sometimes looking. You look when you're mad at your job. You look on weekends only. There's the whole gamut of, well, I'm not passive or active. So understanding that it's a spectrum is going to help you to understand different ways to engage with those workers. So, in a separate LinkedIn study, they said that only 15% of people are actually completely closed to a new opportunity. So that's a good chunk of people that are open to that. And understanding the dynamic of the labor force, a lot of the time, and the people that you're recruiting nowadays, especially given there's really low unemployment, are going to be people who are already working. So you have to find ways to engage with people who are probably more on that spectrum and are not just purely unemployed, active job seekers, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I look to people who have done research on this sort of thing. So BCG has done a really good study called what job seekers wish employers knew. And so they talk about, well, I wish you knew this and this and this. And so when they say people are not looking for work, or they're on the spectrum of, well, I'm not actively looking, so I'm kind of in that passive pool. The first thing is, well, obviously friend's recommendation. I want to get a recommendation from a friend. Well, how do you get that? Then you've got outreach from someone that I know in my network. So think a LinkedIn contact that you kind of adjacently know. And then they're open to receiving outreach from professional recruiting sites, from professional networks, and from job sites. And so it's important to have coverage as much as you can in all of these areas. So number one, I would say build out a referral program. If you don't have something formalized that incentivizes and reminds employees within your company that you're hiring and what jobs are open, and incentivizes them to recruit for you on your behalf, that's a loss. You need to have a program that's up and running in terms of referrals. Now, that's not earth-shattering news, but it's shocking how many companies have actually no program in place to reward and remind people of that. People get tied up in their daily jobs. They might love their job, love their company, but are they checking the career site of their own company every week to see the updated positions for what they're hiring for? Probably not. They might know their team and that sort of thing. And so there's lots of great software that can help with those conversations and those reminders. Two is to get onto social media. And so contact people who are, just kind of browsing, let them know that you're hiring, and do that in a more passive way. You got to understand when you're targeting those passive groups, and especially when you're using social channels, partner distribution channels, the conversion rate's not going to be the same. So you can't expect your cost per application to be the same running a Facebook campaign about your hiring campaign as through a job search website. The CPA is going to be much higher because, again, you're targeting people who are not actively looking, but you're creating awareness. And then what you want to do is you want to have a base layer of recruitment marketing that's happening to make sure that you have coverage. And so using publishers like Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Talent.com gives you that baseline coverage, and a lot of programmatic companies can help you do that all at once. People who, especially websites that use email alerts, are very important to engage with, because that's a key way to engage with people on that passive active spectrum. Websites like ours, we've got a few main ways of engaging with candidates. We've got our SERP, so people who come actively and search and give us keywords and we show them jobs and they click. That's definitely at the active side of the spectrum. And then we've got people who sign up for email alerts. And you'd be blown away by the interesting data that we can pull out of that about how people look for work. I would consider a lot of the people signed up for email alerts to be passive job seekers, because we see them, they come in, they find employment, they go dormant for a little while, and then, hey, they're going to fire that up 9 months later. And you go, oh, nice to see you. You kind of start to see their job search process happen almost underwater. So they start to click a little bit more, they're more interested, then they start to do applications, then it gets a little more serious, and then it kind of goes dormant again. And this is a cycle that's happening all the time. And so in order to access that wider talent pool, you need to have coverage across all of those bases.
Those are just great points. And I think it's important to remember that whether you're using a referral program or job alerts, we're still coming back to the fact that the way you're going to communicate the opportunity to anybody is with that job posting. And that job posting really has to be powerful in order to engage them, particularly when they have all the other options that we have been talking about.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the end of our show, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to tap into your wisdom on where we are with AI and ChatGPT and its potential impact on recruitment advertising. What do you think?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. I think there's a lot of base ways that companies can start engaging with it right away, and these are some of the things that employers can do right away. This is going to make job postings easier. It's going to make it easier to create descriptions, to say, hey, how would a marketer write this job description? Ask ChatGPT all of the things that we've told you during this call. How do you simplify this? How do you highlight the benefits? How do you talk about this? If you were a job seeker, what would you want to read in this job description to make you apply? Use it to really simplify your titles, to get more traffic, organic traffic. Chris Foreman did a really good a webcast that I would encourage people to watch about some of the ways AI can currently impact both recruiters and job seekers. But I want to take a brief moment to talk about the aspirational portion of that and where I think things are going to go, because AI is going to have a massive impact on the way that we recruit. And the way that I like to think about it is, imagine looking for a job with a personal shopper, with a personal recruiter, where you can be nuanced and you can have discussions and you can have conversations on both sides, as a recruiter, as a job seeker. And that's going to really make that connection much closer. Imagine being able to say, I'm looking for a job, something that's near me. I don't want to drive more than 25 minutes. I'd like the pay to be $25 an hour. Here's my resume. Send me things that you think I might be experienced for. Actually help me to apply for those. That is going to make that process so much easier than using keywords and having to, really distill job descriptions, and having almost like an employee who's doing that work on the job seeker side is, that's, I think, where things are headed. Same thing on the recruiter side. Imagine being able to say, I really like this application. Can you show me ones that are similar to it with a bit more experience in my pool of resumes? Oh my gosh, that's going to make that experience so much faster, so that recruiters can spend more time doing the high value work of making the candidate experience better and contacting people much more quickly and making those connections almost instantly.
We talk a lot about using AI to take over the mundane tasks so that recruiters can do what they do best. That leads to a caveat. I agree with everything you said about AI, but I've seen a lot of commentary on social media about using ChatGPT to write job descriptions, or job postings, I should say. And the little known fact is that ChatGPT, at least the 4.0 version, which is the most prevalent one right now, was trained on data prior to 2021, which means that its knowledge about the kinds of job postings that it would evaluate as excellent is based on job postings that aren't like the ones that you and I have been described, more like marketing documents. So it's very important, if you're going to use ChatGPT, to understand that it's going to bring back a job posting that's much like a position description. And that's where the recruiter can add his or her expertise, his or her knowledge that the machine doesn't have, to really forge a great, powerful job posting. So food for thought. Who knows where it's going to go? If you had been able to say, well, I know exactly where it's going to go, I'd want to go to Las Vegas with you and take another career. So Rob, listen, thanks very much for being here. My apologies for our kind of rough start here technologically, but we got it straightened out. And I'd like you to just close by telling the audience where they can get in touch with you, or where they can learn more about talent.com if they'd like to follow up.
Sure. Yeah. So appreciate you having me. Really enjoy doing sessions like this. You can email me. My email is just rob@talent.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Robert Boersma. Talent, there's lots of ways to find information about us. You can email me. Happy to send more info. Otherwise, you can visit our website, which is talent.com. So fairly easy to find.
Well, thank you. And thanks all of you for joining us today for this session. I don't know about you, but I learned a lot from Rob. So I really hope that the session was interesting, engaging, and informative, and that you'll come back again for our next issue, or our next edition of RecAd Savvy from TAtech. Thanks very much. Bye-bye now.